I was babysitting. A friend of mine worked at the dentist office with your biological mother, and she knew that she needed a babysitter for you. So when you were 6 weeks old and she got ready to go back to work, I started keeping you. And, you know, I feel like that's a God thing because it let me have time with you as an infant. You know, I think God knew ultimately you would end up with us. So this gave us several months together, you know. So I babysat you for probably 3 or 4 months, and then I realized I needed to go to work. And you went to a new babysitter. Then when December came is when you got sick. Long story short, you had spinal meningitis. You were airlifted to Birmingham to Children's, and you were paralyzed from the neck down. And doctors said you would never move and you would never breathe on your own. And, you know, we weren't involved right then, but we went up and visited. And I remember telling your birth mother, you know, there's always hope. Your birth parents had some major problems, and it was really hard to handle that their little baby girl was so sick. And some people are not strong enough to get by that, and they weren't. It wasn't that they didn't love you, because they did. But after so many months, they kind of moved away. But when we found out, you know, that they were no longer in the picture, we started going to Birmingham every week on our off day. We had the same off day, and we went every week, and do you remember us coming to visit? Because you would not talk to us.
Oh, no, she wouldn't say a word.
But that was before but we kept coming every week, and you got to know us, and then it got to where you didn't want us to leave, and that was hard. One day, the social worker called me from Children's and said, "Do you think y'all are interested in Heather?" I said, "Well, yeah." She said, "Well, you better do something quick because they're trying to move her to another state." And then they didn't have to worry about it. So we went to court and fought DHR. And, I mean, here we were. All our kids were fixing to be grown and gone. And we were starting over with a 4.5-year-old. And people were saying, you know, I mean, y'all fixing to be empty nesters. Everybody's fixing to be gone, and you're going to start over? And they would say, what's possessing you to do this? You know, because you were medically fragile, you have all these issues. And my answer has always been, that's what God wants you to do. Well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to, the expenses and this and that? And we said, it'll work out. I mean, it'll just work out. Somehow. God will take care of it. That's just always been, and He has, every minute since then. He's taken care of everything that's come along. And you know that now, don't you? Finally got you home. And then 1 year later, almost to the day, the adoption was final. And that was a happy day. And you know what I remember, what's funny? If anybody asked you your name, you said Heather Elizabeth. You never said your last name. Never. And from the day of the adoption on, if anybody ever said, what's your name? You said, Heather Elizabeth Davis. But you would never say your last name to anybody before that because you knew we were all Davis and yours was different and you wouldn't say it. But it was so funny from the day of the adoption on. You would say, Heather Elizabeth Davis.
We were shopping one Christmas, and you had to go in Kmart. And I think Heather was probably, I'm guessing, maybe 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8. During Christmas time, they had it was Kmart, and the lot was full of these things sitting out in front of the store. You remember this? And you said, are those bicycles? And I said, yeah, why? She said, I want one. And I said, well, Heather, I said, you may need to wait a little while before we get a bicycle. I said, you got to build your muscles up and stuff before you can ride one. She said, well, I can try, can I? If I'd had the money, she'd had a bicycle that Christmas.
Well, that's kind of been your attitude your whole life. You try and you do, and what do we always say? You can do whatever you want to. You just may have to do it different than somebody else. But you can do it, whatever you want to do.